Grant Shapps, Transport Secretary, joining us now. Mr Shapps, good morning. Good of you to join us this morning. What's your advice to motorists at the pump today?
Advice would be carry on as normal, and that's what BP are saying as well. They describe it on the average day that they have a handful of petrol stations that they have to close out of 12 or 1,300. And the problem's not new. There's been a lack of drivers actually for many months through this pandemic because, as your report just said, during the lockdown, drivers couldn't be passed through their lorry HGV tests, and that's what's led to this problem. But many more tests are being made available now, so we should see it smooth out fairly quickly.
Not according to the Road Haulage Association. They say it's another year of angst.
Yeah, there's a difference between this specific issue in the very short term and the much longer term issues, because in fact, in point of fact, I was talking to the chief executive of the largest road haulage organisation, Logistics UK. I think he said he's been in the job for 5 years, and the very first thing on his desk was the shortage of lorry drivers, and it's never gone away. That said, most people won't have ever noticed that. So there's a difference between what is a systemic shortage, which we want to deal with, but also the shorter term problem, people not having been able to take their tests during coronavirus for understandable reasons, and the number of new tests that we've now made available by doubling the supply of those tests.
It would be disingenuous to say that's the only reason.
Well, COVID is the main reason. It's a global problem, and Europe is hit particularly bad. We've got, for example, in Germany, a 60,000 shortage, in Poland, a 123,000 shortage of lorry drivers. So it is, as I say, it is the principal cause of the problem, and we're working very hard to change it, including changing the laws in order to provide more tests for HGV drivers and encouraging people to come back into the market. But you're right, there are longer term problems, which is it's a difficult a long day's work. It's a hard work. It's a skilled job, and actually it's been underpaid up until now. So we very much welcome the salaries going up, the wages going up, and that's attracting more people back to the sector.
A quick fix would be short-term visa for drivers in Europe to come to the UK.
I'll look at everything, and we'll move heaven and earth to do whatever we can to make sure that shortages are alleviated with HGV drivers. But we need to look at the things which are going to make a difference. And the big problem is the testing of drivers coming in. You get an attrition rate, people retire. If you can't get new people in, and we were unable to test 40,000 drivers during coronavirus, that's the principal problem. And of course, there are already 6 million EU nationals with settled and pre-settled status, some of whom will already be eligible to drive. Enticing them to come here is really the higher salary, and we just need to make sure that tests can be passed if people have perhaps have an expired licence but want to get back to driving a lorry.
Move heaven and earth to get them to come here. Reports this morning in the newspapers that the Environment Secretary wants these visas for skilled workers to have a short-term visa for lorry drivers from Europe. You and the Home Secretary do not. Is there any truth in that story?
No, actually, we're at one on this. I think he's actually talking about the seasonal workers scheme specifically. And as I say, I wouldn't rule out doing something, or any of measures that are possible to take for lorry drivers. My point is that over a long period of time, what we've done in this country is rely on importing cheap European, often Eastern European labour, undercutting the domestic market and creating more long-term problems. So we end up never actually getting out of this cycle, which, as I say, has existed for years. I welcome the fact that lorry drivers are able to attract a better salary, and that's what we need, including better conditions as well. And 99% of lorry drivers in this country are white, male, average age 55. We need to make this a more attractive industry to go into, and the solution to that is to have those slightly higher wages and better conditions at truck stops and the like as well.
These short-term visas, these specialist skilled worker visas, ballerinas are on the list and HGV drivers are not.
Well, as I say, I wouldn't rule anything out here, but what I don't want to do is exacerbate.
Yeah, but that's absurd.
Yeah, but the difference here is that the real problem that we face, and we know this because as soon as the tests become available, they are snapped up immediately. The real bottleneck in all of this is testing. That is where we need to relieve it.
You've made the point as far as that's concerned, Mr. Shamps. But we're talking about bringing in drivers in the interim to try and fix this problem. We're 110,000 drivers short. There are drivers, 14,000 drivers went home during the pandemic. Only 600 have come back. By any maths, there's a good 10,000, even with slippage, who could come back and at least try to help in the short term. They can't get a skilled worker visa, but a ballerina can.
I should say those numbers are hotly debated, but I won't go into all of that. What I would say is we've got 6 million, as I say, EU settled and pre-settled status. Many of those people can already drive. We've also got hundreds of thousands of Brits who are able to drive and are being attracted back. So we'll do whatever it takes. As I said, we'll move heaven and earth, and I'll look at any feasible scheme. We've already taken measures which have doubled the number of tests available, including changing the law.
Okay.
So we're using every lever at our disposal to do this.
Are you going to look at the skilled worker visa? Is that what you're saying, or not?
Absolutely not ruling anything out at all. We want to see this problem resolved, but I also want to see it resolved for the long term, not just a short-term fix, which ends up exacerbating the long term as well.
How many forecourts were affected this morning?
Well, out of BP's 12 or 1,300 forecourts, yesterday they told me that 5 had to be closed throughout the country. And so there's no shortage in terms.
Not just BP that supplies fuel, though, is there?
BP and Tesco, the others, Morrisons and Asda and other supermarkets are saying they have no problems, as have other petrol companies. So it has been quite a defined problem. This is not a shortage of fuel at the refineries, and it's not something new. In fact, when BP
doesn't matter if it is or not. If you can't get it from the refinery, as Tony Blair found out all those years ago, you can't get it from the refinery to the forecourt. It doesn't matter where the problem is.
That was different because they had massive numbers of HGV drivers not working. There was an actual strike. There was a blockade. It was a very different situation.
Yeah, my point is they couldn't get it from the refinery to the forecourt. That's going to be a similar problem if we can't get more drivers. My question to you as Transport Secretary this morning is, how many forecourts are affected?
Well, as I say, 5 yesterday on the BP forecourts. The point I was going to make, though, Kate...
So there's only 5 petrol stations, forecourts in the whole country that's impacted?
Of BP yesterday, that's the case. But, Kate, the point I was going to make...
What about the others? No, let's clarify this point, because you're saying that there isn't an issue. All the front pages this morning are saying that there is an issue. The Petrol Retailers Association is saying that there is an issue. They're saying keep a quarter of a tank in your keep a quarter of fuel in your tank just in case you can't get any. So all of these people are wrong, and you're saying there's only 5 petrol stations affected.
I want to answer this very precisely, so I appreciate it if you just give me 10 seconds to do that. 1, I'm not saying there's no issue. There has been an issue, and that's what was reported on. 2, the conversations that were reported out and are in today's paper are from over a week ago and refer to the situation over the previous 3 months. So what people can see is that although there are stresses and strains in the system, by and large, it had not impacted on people's everyday life when it came to filling up with petrol. Now, what we need to make sure is that we can continue to have more people capable of driving and therefore continue to alleviate the problem, and we'll move heaven and earth to do that.
How many petrol stations, forecourts are affected this morning? As Transport Secretary, you must know.
So I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that at 7 a.m. in the morning. What I can tell you is...
What was it, 10 o'clock last night?
As of last night, 5 petrol stations on BP network of 12 or 1,300 were affected. Yeah. And I'm meeting this morning with Tesco, and I'm sure they'll give me the update for themselves. And none of the other retailers said that they had any closures.
How much is Brexit to blame?
Well, I've seen people point to Brexit as if it's the culprit here. In fact, they're wrong. Not only are there very large and even larger shortages in other EU countries like Poland and Germany, which clearly can't be to do with Brexit, but actually because of Brexit, I've been able to change the law and alter the way that our driving tests operate in a way that I could not have done if we were still part of the EU. So Brexit actually has provided part of the solution of giving more slots available for HGV tests, and a lot more, twice as many tests available now than before the pandemic. A large proportion of those I've only been able to do because we're no longer actually in the EU. OK. How are you feeling about civil servants working from home? London Tech Week conference yesterday, Sarah Healy said that she enjoys working from home. She's a top mandarin, because she can spend more time on her Peloton exercise bike. Well, look, I think we're in a world now where there is a combination. People were working from home. People are going into the office. I had a look actually. I noticed on the last week for which I have numbers, there were about 1,300 transport official civil servants in the office. I've been in this week, and people are pleased to come back to the office. There will be times when people want to work from home. We are in this sort of transition stage through the autumn, and I think things will settle down into probably more of a hybrid world. But there's nothing like the spark of being in the office, as a lot of my team found this last week or two.
Although you find it very productive being working from home, don't you, Minister? We can never get you in here, can we?
I mean, love to come and see you.
When?
Oh, well, as soon as you invite me on again, Kay, I'd love to come
Okay,
in.
we'll see you next week sometime.
I do find genuinely that it's helpful to be in the office. There are times where it's quite nice to be at home when you're on the radio first thing.
Okay, and on the telly box, talk to me about lateral flow tests before I let you go. There were some suggestions that the PCRs would be replaced by lateral flow tests in time for half-term holidays for the kids. I was reading yesterday that there aren't enough lateral flow tests, and there aren't enough people who will be able to supervise those lateral flow tests via Zoom or whatever, and so that's not going to happen. Is that wrong?
I don't think that's right. This is my colleagues over at the Department of Health who've been working very hard on this, and I know they've got the date of half term in mind. We did need to give the producers of these things some time because, of course, they've been busily producing PCR tests over the summer to switch production to lateral flow. But it looks to me like they'll be able to step up to that. I noticed actually in Ireland yesterday that Lidl came along with a pack of which they're selling in their stores in the Republic there for €25, and you get 5 lateral flow tests. I look forward to the expansion of lateral flow tests, perhaps into supermarkets and elsewhere, as we get on to the point where people can buy those for returning from holiday.
So you think a little lateral flow test should be accepted as currency enough, or does it have to be a little bit more formal than that?
Well, it'll be for the Department of Health to set out the rules about how people need to go about this. But remember, with PCR tests, you didn't have to be supervised, as it were. You had to get that PCR test in advance. You had to record the fact that you'd ordered it, but you were then trusted to get on and do it. Obviously, the Department of Health will put some guidance in place as to how they want this to operate, and they're still working on that, so I won't tread on their toes. But I have every confidence that the system will be got up and running in good time.
But you're still hopeful that the lateral flow ruling will be in place for the half-term holidays?
I am, as I say, they're working on the detail of this, and the private market is having to respond to that shift to using lateral flows, and of course they'd need hundreds of thousands, even millions of them available. So there's a big task for that, but as I say, I know my colleagues are working hard on that.
OK, the team will ring you later about coming on next week in the studio. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
I'm not sure I said next week, but I look forward to being there, Kay. Nothing would make me happy.